So today we're going to talk about Froebel blocks. Froebel blocks were invented by Frederick Froebel in the 1800s. And Frederick Froebel was an educator, a German educator, and he felt that children needed to learn through play. At this period of time, only the very wealthy children were able to go to school or have a nanny at home or a teacher at home. And a lot of children had to go to work as early as 5 or 6 years old. And so Frederick Froebel felt that children needed to learn through play and that play was really important to them. So he said it's the highest expression of human development in childhood, and for it alone is the free expression of what is in a child's soul. And we've all seen children play and how they mimic adult behaviors, and they learn through this mimic and the play. And so it's a luxury for children to be able to play, something that we now more or less take for granted in our society. So Frederick Froebel is the inventor of kindergarten. Prior to this, there was, if children did go to school, they just entered at grade 1. He felt that there was a real need for a curriculum really geared at the very young child, and that play was more important than learning rote memorization, math, and reading. So he developed a series of what he called gifts, the Froebel gifts. And I think I talked about in the Frank Lloyd Wright presentation that Frank Lloyd Wright's mother saw these at the Philadelphia World's Fair and brought them home to Frank Lloyd Wright when he was a young boy. So gift number 1 is simply crocheted balls. And if you look at these crocheted balls, you'll see there's the primary colors, 1, 2, 3, and then there's all the secondary colors. So you can both understand shape, you can twirl these around, you understand gravity, you can understand color mixing. So there's a lot of things that you would get from just playing with these. And all of the gifts were introduced one at a time, and then you would move on to the next one. There were very specific instructions on how you played with them. This is gift number 2, and I have all of these at school, so hopefully one day we'll get there and we'll open them up, and we usually play with them. So this has a sphere, a cylinder, and a square. And so what you would do is you would put them on this post, and you would turn and rotate them. So when you rotate a sphere around, it starts to look like a cylinder. When you rotate a cylinder at an angle, it starts to get the look of a sphere. And when you rotate this square, you blur the edges and it starts to look like a cylinder. So you would play with how these are impacted both when they're dynamic and when they're static. So gifts number 3 and 4, he starts to introduce little blocks, and they all come in these beautiful wooden boxes. And this is gift number 3, this is gift number 4. You see gift number 3 just has 8 simple square blocks. And you would have a series of patterns that you would follow and go through a series of exercises with these. And then you would get a more elaborate block system, and you would build different items with them. Here's some of the patterns that you would build. These are blocks, I think 4 and 5. I'm sorry, 5 and 6. And you would start to build these structures, and they had the books that you would follow along, and you would learn how to put items together. So here's gifts number 8 and 9. You get into parquetry blocks, little pegs. So it progresses along. A lot of it mimics the toys that we give our children today. Not exactly, but very similar. So here's the whole gift set laid out, and you'll start creating artwork with them. So Frank Lloyd Wright talked about 5 influences on his life. The first one was those Froebel blocks, and the next one was nature. And so nature, because he grew up working on his uncles, the Lloyd Joneses, up in Wisconsin near Taliesin, where he built his house, and he was influenced by nature and was always surrounded himself with nature. So here he is at age 7. That's about the age that his mother gave him those Froebel blocks. And he stated that those Froebel blocks influenced his architecture and design throughout his entire life. And he said even as an old man, he could still feel those blocks in his hands. And if you look at a lot of his prairie style buildings, they really look like a series of blocks, like he could have built this out of his Froebel blocks. And he said that sense of design and proportion was really important to him his whole life. And this is Unity Temple again. You could see this built out of Froebel blocks. Same with the Roby House in Hyde Park. And even Falling Water. So it all looks like, he even accredited these Froebel blocks throughout his entire life. And so here's some people took blocks and started recreating some of these Frank Lloyd Wright buildings with blocks. And you can start to see how they're very proportional. They're repetitive, and they're using the same size materials. So the Froebel blocks and nature really influenced Wright. What I want to talk about now is the golden ratio. And golden ratio is found in both nature and design. So here's what the golden ratio is. If you start with a perfect square, we call this number 1, and it's the same on all 4 sides. If you add another square next to it, you get 1 next to 1. And then if you make another square that comes at the bottom of those 2 ones, that's a 2. So here's the ratio. And then the next square is a 2 plus a 1. On the other side gives you a 3. And then the next one is a 5 because it's 2 1s and a 3 to get your next square. And then you get 8. So this is the golden ratio, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. It's been used by scientists and designers for centuries. Here's the golden section. It's taking that proportion and following with a curve. And we find this a lot in nature, this whole portion. Eric, when he was doing his presentation, his space reminded me of the golden section. That's why I asked if I had given this presentation yet. It's also called the Fibonacci series. Here we have again 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And we find this a lot in nature. You can see that spiral again. Nature does this automatically, and it's a series that is very pleasing to the eye. Here's some more nature where it follows this series of progressions. Flowers. I don't know what that is. It sort of looks like that COVID. Here's a sunflower. You can see again the spiral continuing around. So when they analyze these, they find a lot of cabbage cut in half. You can see that spiral continuing around. This is a snake. I just thought it was cool because it's kind of the same spiral. But when the snake's all wound up, he looks like the Fibonacci series, or the golden section. So Michelangelo was a famous designer, architect, artist, and he looked at the proportions of the human body and found a lot of relationships in the human body in the spaces and related them to the golden mean. I don't know if you guys know this, but this distance should be the same as your foot from here to here. Your head is the space between your thumb and your higher finger. So there's a lot of relationships on the human body itself also. Le Corbusier, who was an architect in the early 1900s, he took Michelangelo's man and the golden mean and kind of modernized it. And again, same thing, looking at proportions on the human scale. Here's the golden ratio. Somebody took and looked at someone's head, the inner ear, and how that circle comes out into the golden ratio. They've analyzed the Parthenon, the proportions of the Parthenon and the golden ratio. And then we have a golden section right here. Even the Mona Lisa, where she's positioned off center and how her face frames that golden section. Was this intentional? Perhaps, or was it just that's what we find the most beautiful, is this proportion, because we see it so much in nature and it makes sense to us. Here's the famous Apple logo, which is very, very effective. Somebody analyzed that. They've analyzed famous cathedrals. I'm reading a book right now on an architect from Detroit in the early 1900s and his use of the golden ratio in all of his designs. There's the Pantheon again. And so this is our 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. So we've got this 8 by 5 space right here, proportional space. The Taj Mahal even falls into this section of perfectly balanced and proportional. The CN Tower in Seattle. Is that Seattle or is that Toronto? So again, we're looking at this golden ratio. And people have analyzed musical instruments and how they're proportioned. Is it because that's the most appealing to us? Is it because it gives the best sound? Or is it because somebody consciously decided to use these proportions when they were designing? And the other one, I put this clock up last because when I was in architecture school, we were always told to put a clock on at 10:10, 10 minutes after 10. And is that because it fits into this golden ratio? Like if we had a clock in our project, we would do it at 10:10. There are some theories that it's because 10:10 is the hour that Lincoln was shot. I don't know which is true, but it just visually looks good because I've got the V going up, which is more uplifting, and I've got it in this proportion that makes more sense. So that's a quick overview on the golden mean and the Froebel